Rebels and loyalists have agreed a ceasefire in Georgia. 50 people died in a week of fighting that pushed the republic to the brink of civil war. And the UN calls for a truce in Somalia. 20,000 have been killed and injured there. Good evening. A week of fighting that's turned the centre of the Georgian capital, Tbilisi, into a battleground ended this afternoon with tentative agreement on a ceasefire. 51 people are reported to have been killed and 283 injured as rebels tried to drive President Gamsakhourdia from power. Tonight, the rebels and some of those who had been supporting the president issued an ultimatum calling on him to go. Both sides have warned that civil war could engulf the former Soviet republic if the situation is not resolved.
Early this morning, the opposition forces surrounding the Georgian parliament resumed their attack. Tracer bullets streaked across the city. There was cannon and heavy machine gun fire from several different positions around the parliament building. The move to get negotiations underway came amid some of the fiercest fighting of the week, with indiscriminate shooting in much of the city centre. The opposition forces had declared their determination to force the surrender of President Gamsakhourdia, the man they accuse of dictatorship and of collaboration with the leaders of the August coup.
The forces opposed to Zviad Gamsakhourdia say they have him completely surrounded now, but they're still being held back by sniper fire, and the bunker itself is heavily fortified.
Despite day after day of heavy attacks, the fortress-like parliament building has proved almost impenetrable to the unsophisticated firepower of the rebel forces. President Gamsakhourdia has remained in his bunker deep beneath it. The opposition achieved a spectacular breakthrough yesterday when they stormed the KGB headquarters at the rear of the parliament, freed several political prisoners and set the building ablaze. Representatives of government and opposition held 5 hours of talks at Tbilisi's television station this afternoon, in the midst of some of the fiercest fighting of the week. Opposition forces renewed their attacks on the Georgian parliament, and troops loyal to President Gamsakhourdia set fire to the Hotel Tbilisi, the temporary headquarters of the opposition. Tonight, several large buildings in the city are still ablaze, but the ceasefire declared at 6 o'clock local time appears to be holding, with the exception of some sporadic gunfire. There seems little prospect of a more permanent truce, though. Negotiations aimed at finding a solution to the crisis collapsed tonight when none of President Gamsakhourdia's representatives turned up, a move which may have lost him the military support he so badly needs. The leader of the National Guardsmen, who remained loyal to the president until now, joined with opposition leaders in demanding Mr. Gamsakhourdia's resignation. A communiqué issued tonight said that if he did not do so, he must accept full responsibility for the events which will follow. I understand they have already drawn up detailed plans to storm the parliament where he's taken refuge. Carol Walker, BBC News, Tbilisi.
There are signs of growing tension between Russia and Ukraine over future military cooperation, despite a series of agreements drawn up by the Commonwealth of former Soviet republics. Boris Yeltsin wants the 11 members of the new Commonwealth to share joint military control. But Ukraine and 2 other states, Moldavia and Azerbaijan, are demanding the right to maintain their own armed forces. Azerbaijani troops have been shelling the disputed territory of Nagorno-Karabakh after Boris Yeltsin ordered the Soviet army to pull out. Up to 14 people were killed.
The future of the former Soviet Union's armed forces is still shrouded in doubt. The Ukrainians are insisting they want their own army. Along with Moldavia and Azerbaijan, they're refusing even to take part in a combined armed forces for the new Commonwealth. At this base, the hammer and sickle has long since gone. It's the Ukrainian national flag that flies here. These men, who used to be Soviet soldiers, now swear allegiance to the Ukraine alone. The Ukrainians say they're still committed to getting rid of nuclear weapons from their territory, but they don't want to be part of any military bloc. They don't trust the Russian Republic, and they don't like the fact that its leader Boris Yeltsin now has his finger on the nuclear button. But some officers in Moscow are trying hard to stop the disintegration of what was the Soviet army.
It is very complicated, and sometimes I think it could be a little bit dangerous process, if the leaders of independent states will not demonstrate their political wisdom.
While the fate of this superpower army is being debated, its troops are scaling down their activities, and they've been pulled out of trouble spots like Nagorno-Karabakh, where there's been fighting for almost 4 years between Azerbaijanis and Armenians. Since the troops left, violence has now flared up there again. More people have died today in the capital Stepanakert, where they've been trying to hold elections. As the soldiers withdraw, this is a test for the new Commonwealth. Can it keep the peace in such places as Nagorno-Karabakh better than the old Soviet Union? Or will regions like this descend, as Mikhail Gorbachev has warned, into even bloodier chaos? Ben Brown, BBC News, Moscow.
The American Defense Secretary Dick Cheney has said the former Soviet authorities are still building nuclear weapons and targeting them at the United States. Mr. Cheney said ways had to be found to redirect Soviet military activity to civilian uses. He said until then, Americans wouldn't be confident that the former Soviet Union had really changed. Here, there's been a sharp drop in public confidence in the economy, according to an opinion poll to be published tomorrow. The poll suggests pessimists outnumber optimists by 17%. Labour believes the recession will drive support from the Conservatives. And on voting intentions, the same poll suggests Labour now has a lead of 6 points over the Conservatives. 2 recent polls have given the Tories a small lead.
John Major saw his party's ratings improve while the political debate concentrated on Europe. So before this latest poll was published, he returned to the attack over a single currency, writing to Neil Kinnock, saying, "Under your policy, we would be compelled to join and give up the pound, regardless of the wishes of Parliament."
To try and commit ourselves now, years in advance, in unknown circumstances economically in this country, in unknown circumstances economically elsewhere in Europe, in unknown circumstances economically in the world, is folly. Now, if that is what the Labour Party want to commit themselves to, let them defend it.
But Labour brushed that aside, accusing the Prime Minister of avoiding the real issues.
The Conservatives have tried to distract the people with outside activities outside the country. John Major getting on planes, John Major getting off planes. But in every household in Britain, people know that what really counts is jobs, homes, the National Health Service, education.
Private criticism from some Conservative MPs that the Chancellor's economic predictions have been too optimistic has become more open this weekend. One senior minister told me Norman Lamont's political judgment had always been questionable. There's enormous frustration among Tories who see little hope that the promised economic recovery will materialise much before the election. According to Murray, the voters have come to the same conclusion. While in recent months a small majority believed the economy would get better, 41% now say they think it will get worse in the next 12 months. Only 24% said it would improve, while 31% said it would stay the same. Neil Kinnock plays on those doubts in a letter sent to 1 million homes in marginal areas. The Conservatives, he said, have chosen recession and privatisation. The result is that manufacturing and construction have been pushed into slump. Mr Kinnock goes on to say that the great majority of people would be better off under Labour's tax proposals, something Conservatives insist can't be squared with the opposition's spending plans. It's that kind of issue, rather than Europe, that's certain to dominate the election campaign, with ministers claiming that while the economy hasn't picked up as quickly as they hoped it would, things would have been far worse under Labour.
Details of the government's plans to privatise British Rail will be announced next month. They include the possible sale of intercity passenger services and rail freight and the leasing of commuter lines. The proposals will be in a white paper issued by the Transport Secretary Malcolm Rifkin. But the breakup of British Rail's monopoly will not begin before the general election. The leaders of Somalia's warring factions are to meet a special United Nations envoy next week. The UN has called for a truce to end the fighting, which has killed or wounded up to 20,000 people in the capital Mogadishu during the past 6 weeks. A UN relief worker in the region says leaders of 2 of the main factions have now approved the visit of the UN Under-Secretary General James Jonah. He hopes to arrange a ceasefire and to clear the way for a substantial relief operation.
Aid workers described the Somali capital as a slaughterhouse, a ruined city with savage daily fighting between the rival factions. Heavy shelling was again reported today north of Mogadishu. The UN estimate that 20,000 people have been killed or wounded in the past 6 weeks. Hospitals can't cope with the numbers of casualties. Makeshift operating theatres have been set up in houses on the edge of the city. Treatment at its most basic, with medical supplies virtually non-existent. Thousands more have fled the capital. Relief agencies warn that unless aid reaches there quickly, many will starve. Some help has started to get through. The United Nations say they'll be sending more. The Secretary-General is also sending a special envoy to try and negotiate an end to the civil war. This evening, General Mohammed Farah Adid, who leads one of the armed groups, agreed to meet the envoy for peace talks next week. So too did his sworn enemy, Ali Mahdi Mohammed, the interim president. Hopes of a breakthrough, though, remain slim. Neither side has shown any willingness to lay down its weapons. Indeed, every effort has been made to produce more. In a country already hit by famine, a ceasefire is now desperately needed.
The Serb-dominated Yugoslav army is reported tonight to have used land-to-land missiles for the first time against the Croatians. They are said to have struck 20 miles south of Zagreb. A general alert was sounded and people took to air raid shelters. The attack came as UN officials considered a plan for 3 areas of Croatia to become protection zones, with UN troops replacing the federal army. Mike Donkin reports from Sisak in one of the zones.
Their primary school on a housing estate is abandoned. Lessons have moved to an underground shelter for the children of the still frequently shelled Croatian town of Sisak. They stay here, term time and holidays alike, their parents certain that they're not safe on the streets. Sisak's shops and factories have been hit and many hundreds of homes have been destroyed around the last Croat-held town, short of the fiercely disputed border region of Krajina. There, the Serbian majority currently enjoy the protection of an occupying federal army. Under the United Nations plan, Krajina would become one of 3 protected areas. The army would have to leave to be replaced by the UN's Blue Berets. In Sisak today, one of the UN's advance teams who'll deliver a complete on-the-ground briefing to Cyrus Vance next week. They were in the town hall, though, not on the front line.
Discussion with the local authority and the military commanders is also very important in order we can have all the information in organizing a peacekeeping operation. It's not so much just looking at the area of conflicts.
But Croatia's own troops would act to step up the war, the Republic's president warned today, if the UN didn't send a peacekeeping force swiftly. And they'd finally seize back all occupied Croatian territory. And tonight, Serbia didn't stop at rhetoric. At Karlovac, a 2-day pounding by Federal Army artillery, mortar and rocket launchers has killed 10 people and injured 30 more. On the outskirts of Zagreb this evening, an air raid warning followed a series of 6 heavy rocket explosions and blacked out the capital. Mike Donkin, BBC News, Croatia.
Air accident investigators in Sweden say ice could have caused a Scandinavian Airlines DC-9 to crash near Stockholm yesterday. All 129 passengers and crew survived after the plane came down shortly after takeoff.
The Investigation Commission has ruled out the possibility of pilot error in this extraordinary accident which left a DC-9 MD-80 in a field split into 3 parts and only 2 serious injuries amongst the passengers. Both engines apparently failed 2 minutes after takeoff. Foreign bodies, probably ice particles, are believed to be the probable cause. The Accident Commission notes that de-icing instructions were only partly observed prior to takeoff. The plane had spent the night out on the tarmac at Arlanda International Airport, and a possible explanation, according to the investigators, could be lumps of ice in the undercarriage, which were released and sucked into the engines when the wheels were folded shortly after takeoff.
Now, with news of today's sport, here's David Davis.
Today's First Division football in England brought good news for the top 2 clubs, Manchester United and Leeds, who meet tomorrow. While they prepared, some of their closest rivals were dropping points.
Sheffield Wednesday at Queen's Park Rangers hadn't conceded a goal in 3 matches and 7 minutes until Ray Wilkins precisely ended the sequence. Wilkins' skill gave pleasure even to the Sheffield manager Trevor Francis, one of the season's best goals, he said afterwards. And there was more to come from the 35-year-old who last played for England in 1987. His accurate cross almost produced a second-half goal for Andy Sinton. Had the ball gone in, Wednesday would surely have failed to capture the point that barely keeps them in touch at the top. David Hurst, the last-minute scorer. Aston Villa, also in the chasing pack, took a 15th-minute lead at home to Southampton through Cyril Regis, another player who's showing that it's experience that counts, not age. After scoring one, he set up another for Dwight York, who bore down on Tim Flowers for his 8th goal in 10 games. 2-0 for Villa, but Southampton replied with Alan Shearer's goal 11 minutes from the end. This time, though, the comeback specialists didn't make it.
The Merseyside derby saw Nick Tanner give Liverpool a first-half lead at Goodison, but Maurice Johnston equalised for Everton and then hit a post before the end. David White got Manchester City's winner as the champions Arsenal were beaten for the second time in 3 days. Today's results mean there's only one change in the top 6 of the First Division. Villa move above Liverpool, who are now 12 points behind Manchester United, having played 2 more games. In Scotland, Scott Crabb scored twice for Hearts, who overwhelmed St Johnstone, and Dale Gordon got one of the Rangers' goals, which beat the bottom club Dunfermline. So no change at the top of the Premier Division. Celtic drew at Aberdeen, and Hibernian beat Dundee United. The athlete Liz McColgan has rounded off her exceptional year with victory at the County Durham International Cross-Country meeting. McColgan, Britain's only individual gold medalist at the World Championships, once again outclassed her opponents.
The World 10,000 metres champion and New York Marathon winner, Scotland's Liz McColgan, has carried all before her in 1991. Her appearance at Bemis ensured a large crowd who weren't disappointed. Initially challenged by Kenya's Susan Surma and the Russian Olympic champion Olga Bondarenko, McColgan began to ease clear of a high-class field on the 3rd of 4 laps. By the time she reached the finishing straight, the only competition was for the minor places. An exceptional year for Liz McColgan was ending with another prestigious victory.
It's a good end to the year, you know. I don't know when it's all going to come to an end. There's going to be something that's just going to blow up because every race, every award, you know, it's just got better and better.
Britain's top sporting personality is now heading for Florida to begin her preparation for perhaps the biggest prize of all, an Olympic gold medal.
Scotland began their preparations for Rugby Union's 5 Nations Championship when their A-team beat Spain at Murrayfield by 36 points to 16. Scotland, fielding 11 members of their World Cup squad, ran in 3 tries before half-time, including 2 from their captain Peter Dodds. But the crowd, who were all packed into one side of the ground, were treated to a Spanish revival in the second half. Pablo Gutierrez scored their second try, which reduced Scotland's lead to just 4 points. The Scots finished strongly, though, collecting 3 more tries, with their number 8, Doddy Weir, scoring the best of them. Scotland A, the winners, 36 points to 16. And England's ice hockey team survived a determined fight back by Scotland to win the home international at Murrayfield 7-6. England dominated the early stages, opening up a 4-0 lead when Anthony Johnson scored at the end of the first period. But Scotland recovered to score 4 goals of their own without reply in the second period. Then they drew level at 5-all, this time through John Haig. England were never behind, though, and wrapped up the game when Damien Smith netted a rebound. England the winners, 7-6.
Tonight's main news again. Rebels and loyalists in the former Soviet Republic of Georgia have agreed a ceasefire, and they've issued a joint ultimatum calling for President Gamsakhudia to go. 50 people have died in a week of fighting around the capital, Tbilisi. That's all from the newsroom. Good night.